Avengers! Assemble.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Excelsior, the world's #1 Marvel's Avengers podcast. I'm your director, Christian Buckley. Joining me, as always, to sort through all the stuff in Marvel's Avengers and Marvel as a whole is my co-host, the Apex legend, Jack Martin.
Excelsior, Christian. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. It's been a wild week for gaming news. So, Avengers, your silence, maybe not a big deal because we got all these other headaches to worry about. Well, headaches for some people, you know. There's other people who are probably making out like bandits this week, but...
Yeah, I think the whole world was looking at Marvel's Avengers in 2022, and then they were quickly diverted because of Microsoft and Activision. So, Marvel's Avengers got off quite easy because everyone was waiting to hear what's happening with Marvel's Avengers. So, great distraction on the part of Microsoft.
Absolutely. And you know what? Maybe this is revenge because back in the day, if you remember, Activision was like the Marvel Games studio. And they botched it big time and lost it all. So this is them striking back at Marvel's Avengers, taking up the news day from them. But little do they know, there's nothing to take away from Marvel's Avengers right now. But before we dive in to what's up with Marvel's Avengers, which will not be much, of course, later this episode, we will be talking about that Moon Knight trailer that dropped this week, the release date for Moon Knight, along with a few other small Marvel stories, and then give our thoughts on our rewatch of Season 1 of Marvel's and Netflix's Daredevil. But, Jack, what's going on with Avengers Marketplace this week? Because that is the real main big thing that is new to the game right now.
Yeah, as it often is with this game, the biggest piece of news this week is the Marketplace. And we finally have, I shouldn't say finally, it's not too long, but we have Kate Bishop's Hawkeye outfit from the Disney Plus Hawkeye series.
Yeah, looks good.
It does look good. It completes the set of Clint and Kate having their TV show outfits, so it's nice to have that in here. You were mentioning off air before we recorded that compared to the Fortnite skin that is released for both of these characters, I think you're leaning more towards the Fortnite skins.
Yeah, so I think the thing is it pops a little more. From a glance, seeing the Kate and Clint skins in this game, which are very good, I do really like them and I want both of them. I feel like they blend in with a lot of the other generic purple skins that both of them have, you know? Whereas in Fortnite, granted, there's not any other Hawkeyes that I know of in the game right now, but the ones that are coming to the game do stand out, are very easily identifiable as those characters, in my opinion. So I think it's like an apples and oranges sort of thing, but I do like just... Also, in hindsight, I feel like we've brought this up before. When they first added the Marvel characters to Fortnite, and we were having all these conversations at the beginning of this run of Excelsior about Walmart Avengers, I kind of wish that the Avengers game just took the Fortnite art style and was more cartoony and had more fun with it, but that's just a personal preference thing, personally.
No, I think you're right. It is... I feel like having the Marvel skins in Fortnite just coincide with the fact that they just look more like cartoon, like what you said, cartoon or like comic book characters already, that art style. So it's kind of a one-to-one translation. Whereas this, they're working with the character models that they have in the game, and they're trying to get them as closely as possible to look like the MCU incarnations, which they often do, I think, very well. And sometimes it's a little bit more difficult depending on the skin. I think these look really good. They obviously look very different in terms of their facial models. They look very different to Haley Steinfeld and Jeremy Renner. But I think for 90% of it looks very accurate. It's just they're kind of working on different structures for the characters in terms of what their skin is based on. So it looks like 90% there, whereas the Fortnite skins just kind of look as good as they possibly can be because they're working with, like what you said, a different art style.
Yeah, I think they work in both scenarios. I want both in each individual game, if I'm being real. But yeah, I think it's a good addition to Marvel's Avengers because Kate, I know she's new to the MCU, but I feel like even within Marvel's Avengers, she was the first DLC character, and as far as I can remember, I feel like most of her skins, like outside of her iconic Avengers, like Young Avengers skin with the scarf and the goggles, I I can't think of many really standout Kate Bishop skins we've had so far.
Yeah, I really haven't been too big a fan of the skins for her. Granted, I don't really play her that much, so I'm not really as in tuned. But I'm kind of with you. I can't really think of any highlights from her. So this is probably like if I had to go through and pick one, this is probably the one I would go through and grab.
Well, when you go back and grab it in the game, there are a few things you can do right now. The priority mission rush we talked about before is sticking around until January 27th as a reminder. One more week to get in every day, get some exotics for your heroes. Again, we've talked about it before. Many people have talked about it before. Not the best thing for a loot-based game to be gating how many exotics you can roll at a time. So like it would be nice if this was just a permanent thing, the way that the Tachyon anomaly made multiple heroes a permanent thing. Like, do you see priority mission rush eventually hanging around longer? Because it got me to actually do priority missions since we did the last week's episode, if I'm being real.
Yeah, I would hope so, especially if you have a max level hero, and at that point you already have the power level cap, you already have the numbers. You're just looking for the perks and the skills in the particular gear slots that you want. Could you remind me, is this as let's say I only want to do this as Thor? Once a day, I can jump in and do a priority mission as Thor. So like Monday I do my priority mission, and then Tuesday I can jump back in as Thor. Or does it have to be different characters?
I think every day you can run it with the same character. I just think you can't run it multiple times a day with the same character.
Gotcha. So I can't jump in as Thor, get my exotic, and then immediately after jump in as Iron Man, get my exotic. It's just locked to one account.
It's one character per day per user, I believe.
Gotcha. So obviously, I think that system could be improved, and you can just kind of jump in and spec out your character as many times as you want. But for right now, this is probably the best way to just jump in and get as many exotics as you can per week. Because I think before this, it was the raid now, and then it was also the Omega level threat and the Mega Hive. So those are like three venues that you could get exotics weekly. But to do this, which is like a 15-minute mission tops, pretty much, it's the quickest way to get an exotic. So I think having systems like that would be good to just have that on a permanent basis.
Definitely, yeah. And I don't know about you, but I did hop in this past weekend to get a few levels out of the XP weekend, cracked a booster pack to try and just Heroes Catalyst, I mean, to boost Spider-Man a little more, and I'm like a couple levels away from level 50, and in that time I did run the priority mission, like you said, very easy breezy. Got a piece of exotic gear out of it. Didn't like it, but I did it again the next day, so it's getting me to play the game more, because exotic farming is something I really haven't done with Marvel's Avengers yet, and this is kind of an easy approach to do that. It's less of a commitment than getting a whole team together and running the whole raid or doing the super adaptoid fight, which for the most part, if you want to queue up randomly, you could either get carried or you could assist with a carry and play Thor, right? And you don't always want to get an exotic drop for Thor if Thor's not your main, which he's one of my mains, but priority mission rush I think is a really great way, like that could be improved, but it's a good entry level to getting gear for your characters at a good clip. Because at the same turn, yes, there's a raid, but like I still don't know if it's super beneficial to be farming gear in this game at the moment. Because what does the future look like, right? Like if you got through the raid once, you could run it multiple times, but what next? You know?
Yeah, I feel like doing the raid, I feel like not even in this game. This is probably just like a blueprint for games like Destiny and like other looter shooters. I don't think the raid should be the thing you run to get good gear. I feel like you should run other things to prepare for the raid. And like obviously from the raid you can get great gear, of course, but I feel like to prepare you should already have good enough gear through things like the priority mission rush or the mega level threat. So I hope there are just more opportunities like this that are somewhat easier to just hop in, whether it's once a day or multiple times a day per week with a character to just get new exotic gear.
Yeah, that would be nice. So we can wait and see what's coming in the future this year because we got other things to worry about with Marvel's Avengers right now, and this is leaving on January 27th. But what's going to be lasting beyond that, Jack, is the return of the Ruskaya Protocols. Do you remember what this is?
Dude, I've been holding my breath, and I'm so glad. No, I actually don't. I don't think I've ever done this. I think this was like the precursor to the Red Room takeover, and I believe it's just another list of challenges: complete X amount of things, destroy Y amount of enemies. I think that's pretty much what this is. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like you just get some materials from random robots to help you unlock files in the Natasha Red Room arc, I think.
Yeah. Um, I can confidently say I've never read a single file in this game or listened to an audio log.
I definitely did a couple, but I fell off quick after I wrapped the campaign. Like I checked one of the Spider-Man things. It was like a transcript of a text exchange between him and Liz. And then I was like, I gotta do how many more missions for Spider-Man's quest line? And then I stopped.
Did
But
you ever beat the Spider-Man? I guess not beat is the. Did you ever complete all those tasks to get the end suit?
no, dude, I'm still going. When I did it this past weekend, I did like 5 steps, and the bar still looks like it's a third of the way through that thing.
Yeah, it takes forever. It is really daunting to get through. I did it, but it took. I couldn't even tell you how long. It took forever.
Yeah, so maybe one day I'll have it done. But until then, there's going to be some downtime because when we go over to updates in the blog this week, in terms of what's next for Marvel's Avengers, Crystal had to say, quote, "We're still working on what's next for Marvel's Avengers," end quote. Now, I'd like to pivot to a stark realities question for you. Should we be worried, or when is the point where we should be getting worried about 2022 content for this game? Like, when is the marker this early in the year? Because we initially, at the end of last year, heard early 2021, probably January, we're going to be getting a roadmap for what this year looks like. It's probably going to be more comprehensive than either of the other roadmaps yet. And then a couple days ago, I checked out Paul Tassi's YouTube channel. He did a video on Avengers because I think he does a lot of really good reporting and discussion about the game. He's been brought up a lot on the podcast, but he said that he heard last year the 2022 content roadmap was supposed to be released before the end of 2021. So he said that he's starting to get a little bit worried that it got delayed past when he heard it was supposed to come out, and we don't really know if things have changed, if things have shifted in terms of sales expectations, what Square Enix wants out of the game versus what Crystal wants to deliver. So when do you think is the point to begin worrying about this year's of content?
Sure. To go back to Paul Tassi's video, I haven't seen that, but I'm like you. I love just sitting and watching him in like a one take video
Yeah.
where he just discusses the game. Like, there's so many different channels out there. on YouTube that do like really high production videos, and the quality is very good. But he just has like a static camera. He's just talking about the game, and he goes on for like a one take thing, and it's very impressive because he never cuts, as
Yeah.
far as I'm aware. And I just want to shout that out because that's great. But
Hmm.
to point out to what he was saying in that video about the roadmap coming out before the end of 2021, I think that was likely Crystal's like plan. And of course, with the gaming industry, like plans change. Um, so I imagine that roadmap is still going to come very soon. I think to answer your question about like when's the point to hit the panic button, I think if we don't hear a substantial piece of update or the roadmap before the end of March, then that is the point to hit the panic button. I'm sort of expecting, like I said last week, to hear a significant piece of update or the roadmap, or whether that's one and the same, in February. Like I feel like January is the time to like get back into the swing of things in terms of like the workers coming back from the holidays and just sort of preparing for the year, and then February being the point to go full bore and talk about the plan for the year. So I'm expecting February. I think if we don't hear by the end of March, then that is probably the point to be concerned about this game.
Sure. I mean, March, end of March is the end of the fiscal year, and I don't know if that would be an incentive for them to sort of instill some confidence in Square or investors by being able to like have a pulse on community feedback or see like what they can promise out of a roadmap leading into a new fiscal year and being like, see, no, there's still reason to trust us and still put money into this, and we have somewhat of an interest in a community that will support and consume and the important thing, buy our skins as we add more content to the game. So I think you're right, where if January goes by and we don't hear anything substantial, um, I don't think I'll be worried. I'll be disappointed because I thought had some really good momentum after the raid and Spider-Man dropped, which the further we get away from that, the further the momentum kind of just goes to a bit of a lull. I don't think it's as bad as it was last year this time when the only like new content news was like, yeah, the next gen version and Hawkeye is coming out sometime in the next 4 months. Like, there you go, you know? Um, so the panic button, like you said, I feel like that's not going to be a reality until I agree with you. The idea of like March, end of March, because the game has had worse downtime over the last year and a half, than it does right now.
Yeah, we had the point from Kate to news about Clint. I think was it November or December to February? Something like that.
I think so. Yeah.
Because
Well,
they did. Was it like a Valentine's Day stream or like something similar, like end of February?
I think it was end of February. I think they did like a blog post and they were like, we're gonna reveal stuff about the next gen version and maybe Hawkeye like a couple weeks later, early March. And then they're like, next gen
Yeah.
version is out this date in March with Hawkeye. And then they gave us a roadmap a little bit after that, I think. So yeah, but as far as like all of December, all of January, most of February goes, I remember last year being pretty light after Kate dropped.
Yeah, I think that will probably be consistent with when we get this news. I'm still expecting February. This is like this update that they had in the blog was just, hey, it was just like to say, hey, I know you're thinking about this. We are too. We're working on it. No concrete information at the moment. I think we're probably a month out, or 3 to 4 weeks out until we get that confirmation. I think. I think if we would hear information in the next week, they would say, "Hey, be sure to be on the lookout next week for more information on what's next." Right now, this is a very vague. We're working on it. We'll tell you when it's ready. That's to me strikes as weeks away from hearing what we're gonna hear, and I'm still under the impression that this is kind of the last year of substantial updates for Marvel's Avengers, and
Agreed.
I kind of feel like they're gonna convey that, like, hey, for lack of a better term, gave it our best shot. 2022 is going to be the final year of major expansions for this game. And hopefully at the same time, they're going to be like, this is the final year. We're going to continue working towards the evolution of Marvel's Avengers in an upcoming sequel. I think that would be great to hear from them. I'm not really sure if that's going to be the case, but that's sort of where my head's at.
Yeah, I would be very interested to have a conversation like later in the year when we have a better idea about like if we even think or would like to see Avengers from Crystal a second time, because like there's also that the fact that like Crystal's partnering with Microsoft right now, and people have speculated that the Western studios of Square Enix are up for grabs, and clearly Xbox can buy anybody they want. So like if things go well with the two of them working on Perfect Dark, they scoop Crystal, Avengers is left without, like, they wouldn't carry Avengers. That's Marvel's IP to give out to whoever they want. So I think it's an interesting road ahead. I agree with you. When we get the roadmap, I could see them be like, and this September, the culmination of the story of Marvel's Avengers with the Captain Marvel Kree Invasion expansion. And you'll have people saying culmination as in the first arc or as the entirety of the game. So I'm curious to see how that's positioned, because I agree with you. They will probably, if not allude to it vaguely, just sort of build up to it as a big finale. But we'll just have to wait and see when it comes to that. And go ahead.
Sorry, someone brought this up on Twitter recently, and it kind of blew my mind. Do you remember when, I think it was like with the Kate Bishop announcement, they specifically used the terminology of like season 1 content?
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you what season we're in right now.
I know.
I don't know if we're in season 2. Like, I don't know if season 1 ended with Black Panther or if season 1 is ending with Captain Marvel. That's some language I would like to have clarified, or if they're even still using that language, because they talked about it with the DLC characters, like the free DLC characters in Hawkeye, well, both Hawkeyes, really. Yeah. And we haven't really heard that since.
Yeah, you know how The Mandalorian, it's like, oh, season 1, season 2, and Book of Boba Fett is like the series? Mm-hmm. I think sometime between the release of Kate Bishop and where we are now, they have shifted from season 1 to the series. You know?
Yeah,
like,
that's a good point.
So, like, hey, if we get a follow-up, great. Party's going on, you know? But if we don't, it's like, what did you expect? We told you this was the series. So,
right.
Well, nice. That's really it with Marvel's Avengers right now. As we said, the downtime, buckle up, because it might be a little while. We do have these events returning. I assume once Ruskaya Protocols is done, they're probably going to bring another thing back. Red Room for Valentine's Day makes sense, even though the Red Room is this, like, you know, a horrifying piece of Black Widow's trauma. But, like, hey, we're making an event. I think we're going to see probably a rotation of events in the next couple weeks, maybe a month or two. But, I mean, in terms of gaming as a whole, that's probably not a problem, because there's a metric ton of things releasing over the next several weeks to keep people busy. But if you are strictly a Marvel fan, Avengers might be pretty light for you. But yeah, that's really what Marvel's Avengers right now. Anything left to say on the future of the game at the moment as we speculate?
Not really. There's really not much we can go on in terms of what to expect for this year. There's some characters, obviously, that have been rumored, leaked, confirmed, that shouldn't have been confirmed. And yeah, we kind of don't have a general sense, really, of where we're going. We can kind of piece things together. Mm-hmm. But other than that, we kind of have to wait until we hear from Crystal in the coming weeks, potentially months, of what we're going to expect for 2022.
Jack, if you had to recommend to the Agents of Excelsior a game to fill the gap of Avengers right now, in terms of, it doesn't have to be Marvel related, but just like maybe a game that gives you the same lizard brain satisfaction of the gear grind in Avengers? Like, what would you shout out there for the next few weeks, new release or
Oh.
otherwise?
Oh, like just sort of podcast game?
Yeah, just something to fill the time. If there's people tired of running the same three missions constantly for exotic gear, they probably already have all of.
Man, for podcast games, I haven't really been in like diving deep into too many Marvel's Avengers like games. Recently I've been playing Skyrim again. That's a game if you just want to chase the trophies in that game. Like I'm sure the listeners have played that a bunch of times. If you've never gone after the trophy list, go for it because it'll keep you busy for tens of hours. Hades is a game I played within
Ooh,
like the past few years that it's not strictly a podcast game. Like the story in it is great, but for the majority of the time, you're just fighting enemies for like a good 20 to 30 minutes on your runs. And after that, you go and talk to people, and that's when you can turn your podcast off. But for the majority, when you're like running through for that 30 minutes, I'd say that's a really great podcast game. So definitely try Hades. I think it's around like $25 on like PlayStation, and if you have an Xbox, it's free on Game Pass. So definitely check that out.
absolutely. And in terms of like gear stuff, we got Destiny's expansion coming out soon. So if the future looks bleak for Avengers at the moment, it looks bright as all hell for Destiny.
When's that hit? The Witch Queen? Is that right?
Yes, the Witch Queen is February 22nd, and if they were still under Activision, this would be what Destiny 3 is. So exciting times.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, gonna be big.
If you to shout out our fantasy critic, if you were allowed to choose expansions, how high up on your board would the Witch Queen have been?
It would have probably been my third round pick.
Okay.
Because my first one was Elden Ring, safe bet, February. Then Hollow Knight, that was a risk. Yeah, third would have been the Witch Queen, just because Bungie always, especially now, they hit their stride. They always deliver on expansions. So very
What was
excited
the
for
most
that.
previous expansion?
The last one was Beyond Light in 2020.
Okay, I want to see what that did in terms of Metacritic because that would have been a really interesting. Oh, PC it had 73,
Okay.
PS4 was 76, PS5 was 70. Okay, that's interesting.
All right, critics.
That's somewhat risky.
That was the best expansion they've had in a while. What the hell?
See, I feel like Destiny reviews poorly, but is beloved by its fans. It's
Yeah,
one of those kind of games.
it's so strange because it's like one of the it's like the gold standard for this type of game, which is just so weird to me that like
Yeah, that's odd.
yeah, you can be that and then not that 70 is a bad score. It's not. It's just like surprisingly low for a really quality experience in my opinion. But in terms of Marvel, we got some other stuff to discuss. Let's get through the small things first, and then we can really cut into that prime rib that is the Moon Knight trailer.
Sure.
We already brought up the Fortnite skins, which honestly also another game to probably fill your time. I know Fortnite might have a bad aura around it, but there's loads of Marvel stuff in the game right now. The Daily Bugle's on the map. You can swing around as Spidey. I don't know if you've messed with Fortnite yet this season, Jack, but there's some cool Marvel stuff in there.
Dude, I really wish Fortnite was still in my day-to-day rotation. It's just I've been off the grind for so long that there's no way I can go back in a substantial way. Like my story with Fortnite is I played it like daily from like when it did Battle Royale in 2017 right through 2018, and then I studied abroad for a semester, came back, and was horrible at Fortnite, and then just stopped. So if that didn't happen, it'd probably still be in the rotation. But what about you?
I got back into it over Christmas and usually have been popping in probably 2 nights a week with my friends from back home to run a few games for a while, and I'm getting very, very close. I did buy the Battle Pass, very close to getting Spider-Man, and it's a great Spidey skin.
Where's he's at? Where is Spider-Man at in the Battle Pass?
So he's tier 9, which is they changed the system now where like you can either you have access to each tier based off of your level, or you can earn battle stars by doing challenges, and you can use those stars to unlock things on each tier. And when you unlock a certain number, the next tier will unlock. So even though I'm not level 100 or 90, I think I'm like 50. I've been doing challenges and spending the stars so I can progress through the tiers. And I'm already at tier 8, and Spidey's right ahead of me. So
Oh, cool.
very excited.
When does like the season end? Like when's the last time you can earn that?
I think like March or like late
Okay, you got
February.
plenty of time.
Oh yeah, Spidey's mine. I'm even gonna get to that last page and get the symbiote suit. I'm so convinced I got this. So
Dude, I still regret not buying whatever battle pass it was to get Mando.
I do have that one. That is nice. I don't have the full. That's the tricky thing with these live service games. I don't have the
Mm.
full fit for Mando. I don't have all the Beskar armor because I didn't do all the Beskar quests.
Yeah, because you buy the battle pass and you get like the season one, episode one armor. Is that right? And then you
Yeah,
do all the quests and you get like end of season one full Beskar.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that is how they get you.
if we're talking about Fortnite regret, I'm also always regret not buying the Marvel Battle Pass season
Yeah,
because man, that Wolverine skin. Oh man.
we talked about it when that happened, but the Galactus event, I know like it was like somewhat mixed in terms of reception, but I was blown away, and I think you
Oh
were
yeah.
too. I think that was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, for as clowned on as Fortnite is, deservedly so at times, like they're still doing some really cool stuff in that game, and I'm shocked that Marvel has played such a big role, and DC even. Like, there's been some Batman like canon storylines with Jonesy, which is weird.
Yeah, that's bizarre. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad Fortnite is just a great like platform for different things to exist. It really is like what's the book slash movie that I'm
Ready
thinking of?
Player
Ready
One.
Player One. Yeah,
Yeah.
just like giant toy box of
Corporate
things, and honestly,
crossover.
it works very well.
Yeah. So Fortnite's going on at the moment. Hawkeye skins are coming. What's going on in the Marvel Universe as well at the moment? Spider-Man: No Way Home, which is probably wrapping up its box office run, I'd imagine in the next couple weeks. But you posted some updates to the box office, which is quite impressive for pandemic times. Uh, very recently, what did it cross? 700 million, you said?
Yeah, it is. It crossed 700 million at the. It's now at 705 million at the domestic box office, and worldwide it is at 1.6 billion dollars.
Impressive. That
Yeah, this is. I think it's the fourth highest opening, or not highest opening. Fourth all time domestic movie. So it's right at that number 4 spot.
Yeah, which I mean, would the hype levels on the internet leading into this make sense? The fact that they were able to achieve that during a pandemic, like right before a big wave of surges, and being able to continue to break this record through those surges, like I'm really impressed that this is the numbers they're getting in a pandemic time. Because like I think even the best movie domestically in pandemic times was also Marvel, and I think it might have been like Black Widow, right, or Shang Chi.
Yeah, it's one of those two. I know they're very close.
Yeah, but even then,
But
pales, you know.
yeah, I mean, it's wild to think about because the way people discuss how this movie is done, they describe it as like performing at pre-pandemic numbers, but these are pandemic numbers. Like, certainly the pandemic to, I'm not sure how great the effect was, but it certainly, I'm sure, dissuaded a decent amount of people from seeing this movie. Even though obviously it's doing incredibly well, I'm sure there are some people out there who decided not to go to this movie and wait till it releases at home to see it. So that is still wild to think about. And to put this into more perspective, it passed Avengers Infinity War, which is now the number 6 spot. That is at 678 million. And it also passed Black Panther, which is now at the number 5 spot. That is squarely at 700 million. And ahead of it is Avatar at 760 million. This is all domestic. People are thinking that's probably not going to get to that spot, so I think it will remain at the number 4 spot domestically, which is still quite the accomplishment considering where we are right now.
Yeah, I think that's a safe expectation, you know. Obviously, great news for the future of Spider-Man, probably. Everybody's probably thinking, if we weren't in a pandemic, what would these numbers be? You and I've had that thought a lot. And as far as I know, there still isn't a release of this in China at the moment, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So if that happens, I'm really not too up to date in terms of like Disney and China's relationship. I know it's not very good, but if that happens, I can't imagine like how much that propels the worldwide total for this.
Yeah. So Spider-Man breaking records, being the big dog that Spidey is. There is an underdog in the Marvel universe, I think. Maybe not in terms of how they perform, but with the in-universe respect. Yeah, respect is the right word. Deadpool. Deadpool does not get much love from the greater Marvel universe. In the fandom, Deadpool is beloved, you know? But there was an interview very recently that I want to bring up with a global IGN outlet that had an interview with Suda51, who makes No More Heroes. He's the director of No More Heroes 1, 2, 3, or sorry, not 2, 1 and 3, and the indie spinoff. His company's Grasshopper Manufacture. In the past, he's made games like, I believe Lollipop Chainsaw was him as well, which he worked on with James Gunn. So Suda51 is a very like niche but great game developer. He's one of my favorites. I've really fallen in love with a lot of his stuff over the last few years. No More Heroes is like in my top 10 now. But he's been vocal in the past, even going as far as referencing Deadpool in the Travis Strikes Again No More Heroes game. He wants to make a Deadpool game. And in his IGN interview, he brings up the fact that he's had some talks with Marvel recently, and this makes my heart sing, Jack. This is an incredible news that I hope comes to fruition.
Yeah, I remember you streaming, if I remember correctly, some of the No More Hero games. So you're a big Suda 51 fan. How well do you think Deadpool would translate to that style of game?
Incredibly well, because No More Heroes is like Travis Touchdown, incredible character. I could go off on this type of stuff that game does narratively. It's just very impressive to me. And it all does it with that crude, crass, immature, like veil of Deadpool that I think, at least the first movie, I thought nailed really well, where there's a really interesting message underneath it all, but it is very grotesque in a lot of ways and immature, but it all somehow works. I think No More Heroes is kind of that. And in terms of gameplay, you got a lightsaber. You're an assassin for hire. You rank up the rankings of assassins by killing other assassins. It's like you could put Deadpool in this game and call it a Deadpool game, and it would make perfect sense, I think. So, I know, like visually, No More Heroes could probably be off-putting to some people because it looks kind of jank, but that's part of the appeal. It's like cel-shaded. I think gameplay and direction-wise, Deadpool would make a lot of sense and be a match made in heaven for the studio, I think.
Yeah, and I honestly like the diversity of game types within like the Marvel universe. Like Midnight Suns is going to be a lot different than the traditional, Spider-Man third-person action game or Marvel's Avengers third-person looter shooter kind of game. And presumably, if this type of game follows his other works, then it would be even more different than any of those types of games. Or like it will be like it seems seemingly third person, but like conveyed in a different way with different art style. And I think there's plenty of room for diversity of art styles and gameplay and stuff like that within making Marvel games. So I think this would be a really welcome addition to that sort of catalog.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of like it would still be a third person game most likely based off of their track record. I think where Marvel games could work to distinguish themselves because I think they've been doing a really great job the past few years. There it does feel like there's tiers to this though, where you have the big focus ones of Spider-Man and Wolverine and Avengers and Guardians, and then you have games like Midnight Suns and Ultimate Alliance and Future Revolution and stuff like that, which are on I don't want to say lesser tiers than that, but like they feel like they're not the big billboard Spider-Man system seller, you know? I think given the right positioning and partnership, I genuinely think they could probably make a cool, probably rated M, very different type of audience game that could be billed as one of those top tier Marvel games. And I think the top tier of what Marvel games has been doing could use a bit more of that diversity, like you're saying, in terms of tone and just approach to what the game is. But
Totally. Yeah, I'd love to see it.
yeah. So we'll see if anything comes of that. We know we got an Amy Hennig game in the pipeline. We got some other things probably that we don't know about that I'm sure we'll hear about this year. But another thing we're going to hear about very soon and see very soon is Marvel's Moon Knight.
What a surprise.
Where were you when you found out?
I was, I think, lying in bed when everyone started tweeting, hey, we're getting a trailer after this football game on Monday, and also the show is coming out in March. Like what? I knew this was at some point in this year. Was not expecting like the first quarter of the year. That blew me away.
Yeah. When we did our little end of podcast talk last week, talking about like most anticipated things, I didn't even bring up Moon Knight because I wasn't even sure it would hit this year because I thought it was coming out after Ms. Marvel. Like, I was ridiculously surprised, insanely caught off guard by that news. So, what is it? It's March 30th is the day of the premiere, right?
Yeah, March 30th, which I this is the first Marvel Studios production of 2022, right? This is the first release.
Yeah, this is it. This is the first thing. This is setting the tone. This is the WandaVision of 2022.
Yeah, and I like how you describe it like that because to me, after seeing this trailer, it does seem like it will be a great week to week watch.
Oh yeah.
Um, Assuming that there's some mystery involved or just dealing with Oscar Isaac's character throughout and dealing with his issues, I feel like that is going to be something you'll want to tune into week by week.
Yeah, so why don't we get into the trailer a little bit? It's not too long, but it gives us a good idea of what the tone will be for this series. Obviously, there's teases of like a big car truck chase, typical. This feels like it should be a Marvel set piece in a television show, you know? But the majority of this trailer is focused on Oscar Isaac's character and the fact that, and I love that they set it up this way. They refer to him as, is it Jonathan or James or something like that?
I thought the names were Mark and Steven.
Steven. Okay. I knew it was like a sort of just average common name. Uh, Steven is what they were referring to him as, but the character of Moon Knight, his alias is Mark Spector, but they led with Steven. And I think that's a very interesting thing because this is Moon Knight's big debut to a mainstream audience. So leading with the fact that he's acting as somebody who he isn't actually is an interesting way to present this character because of his origins and the fact that he has multiple personalities.
Right. Yeah. I know absolutely nothing about the character. But to me, it struck me as his like normal, regular person personality is Steven, and then through whatever means, he like has an alternate personality that he kind of has no control of, and that is Mark Spector as Moon Knight. which is really interesting to me. Like, I want to see how Oscar Isaac approaches that.
Yeah, so I guess general thoughts, because like you, I don't know too much about Moon Knight. I know the meme, right? Like the comic panel, which isn't actually real, but Moon Knight walking down into a basement being like, Dracula, you fucking nerd, I know you're here. Where's my goddamn money?
Yeah, I've seen that 1,000 times this past week.
Yeah. Like outside of the fact that I know he has multiple personalities, I think his original origin was that he had schizophrenia. I don't know if that's changed in recent years, but his power comes from some Egyptian god, and he's essentially Marvel's Batman. That's all I know about him.
Yeah, see, that's a great pitch.
Yeah.
That has me very excited. What I'll say about the trailer, I really actually disliked the music that they chose. They did like a remix of Day and Night by Kid Cudi, I believe, um, which I don't like. Like that was very much like a 2009 Modern Warfare 2 song. Like, why is that coming back? I feel like I would have preferred like an orchestral theme, but whatever. I'm watching this on loop right now without the audio, and honestly, like the visuals is kind of what has me very interested. And yeah, it's really for me, it's the appeal of knowing nothing about this character, having like a straight up origin story for him across multiple episodes of a TV series, and having a level of mystery being involved, presumably. That has me very excited for the show, and for it to lead off 2022, I think is a really interesting choice, and I'm excited to see how that plays out.
Yeah, dude. And like, experiment for you. Watch that trailer on silence with the Michael Giacchino Batman theme playing in your head. Like,
That's a good call.
I mean, I'm with you. I think this is really cool. I think last year with the Marvel television shows, we got to a point where I think they were all at least good, but in hindsight, at the end of the year, I think the one I was the most fond of was WandaVision, just because of like it took advantage of that week to week release and the culture around it. Like we sort of replicated that with Loki, and I think Loki held more consistent, but there was just something about WandaVision that I think took advantage of a Marvel series more than the other shows did. So I feel like with the trickery, the opportunity for like non-linear stuff, the multiple personalities coming into play, we could see that again with Moon Knight. So like it does have me really excited, and of course, the pitch sounds awesome. I wanted Oscar Isaac to be the next Batman. This makes up for that, you know? So like I think it's going to be very very quality, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it progresses. I don't think we have an episode count yet, do we?
I don't believe so. That's something I was wondering as well.
I have to imagine it ends up being one of the like 40 to 50-minute long shows though.
Yeah, I think Disney Plus has found a groove around 8 episodes, 7 or 8 episodes, so I can kind of expect that for the show as well. But I'm kind of with you. Like my worry, my really only worry for the show before actually seeing the first episode is like what you're saying. Like, do they actually treat this like a TV series, or is this more like a really long movie that's just cut up, that just so happens to be cut up in 8 episodes? Because that's what Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I think particularly Hawkeye felt. And for me with Hawkeye, I think that was kind of a big problem. Like, man, I kind of wish this was more of a tight movie than a 8 episode or how many episodes that ended up being. Because yeah, it just felt like episode by episode, it didn't feel like a traditional TV show. And you're right. I feel like WandaVision, and to a lesser extent Loki, made good use of an episodic way of telling a story. So I hope this kind of replicates that. Like, it doesn't have to be like a mystery. Like that's, I mean, it'd be cool if it was a mystery threaded week by week, but it could just be more like a traditional story that like episodes matter in a way that I don't think it really did with Falcon and Winter Soldier and Hawkeye. So that's kind of my hope for this show.
Jack, hearing you say that just sparked something in my mind. What if the mystery of this show with Steven trying to uncover what's going on with Mark and Moon Knight is like Memento. And like each
Dude.
week he's like trying to like solve this mystery and like find these clues. Like that could be really great as a series. And Oscar Isaac is gonna kill it no matter what. And I loved the accent he was doing. He's even made fun of it. Like I think that's the point, that it's bad. Like
Yeah.
so.
Like
I'm excited.
that's a great call, cuz like he's waking up at certain points, like he's tied himself to the bed so he doesn't escape, and then he wakes up not realizing he did that. So I think we'll certainly get elements of that for sure in this show.
Yeah, I'm super excited for it. And do you have any final words on the Moon Knight trailer before we move on?
Not really. Oscar Isaac, I think, is a gem.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see him in a leading role in the MCU.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to see him come into play here because I think there's a chance to get even more mystical with Marvel than we have, even with like Doctor Strange and WandaVision so far. Like, I think we could really open up the floodgates with this, and I'm excited for that because that's really fresh for Marvel. And hopefully we can get some horror vibes in here too, because it felt like there were some shades of that in the trailer with the way it was shot. So
Definitely.
another vibe I got from the trailer though was honestly, and this is a compliment I think, similar to some of the vibes of Daredevil to a certain
Oh, yeah.
degree.
Very violent.
Yeah, big time. So why don't we transition now to our review, our watched content. We watched Daredevil Season 1.
And Christian, let me just say, great to be back on this sort of week by week thing.
Oh, yeah. I really, really, really enjoyed the rewatch. I mean, when was the last time you went through Daredevil? I think you mentioned it recently that you did a rewatch, right?
Yeah, last time I did it was in preparation for season 3, which was in the end of 2018. So that was the last time I went through.
Yeah. So here and now, with the hindsight between now and then of Netflix canceling the shows, the MCU taking precedent, and then the transition to Disney Plus, and then Matt Murdock is back. Like, how did it feel revisiting episode 1 and realizing, hey, as far as we're concerned, this is probably canon now? Like, that was a good feeling, right?
Yeah, dude, absolutely. There's a lot of references. I think maybe even in the first episode, to like the Battle of New York, and like this is kind of in the few years of the aftermath of that. So like it's very much connected to the MCU, and I feel like a lot of people like us are watching Daredevil season 1 after No Way Home and Hawkeye, just sort of being like, "Yep, they're back." So it's really great to go back and revisit the show after bringing them back into the fold, seemingly.
Yes. So be prepared. Spoilers are on for Daredevil season 1. I think the striking thing, because I haven't watched the show since it premiered, right? I was kind of surprised at just how violent it actually is, if I'm being real.
Yeah, is this TVMA? I'm pretty sure
It has to be. It has
that's
to
the
be.
rating for this.
Yeah, because like I remember I was in high school when it came out, and you know, teenagers they can stomach any type of level of violence, and I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. This is like the edgy Marvel, and it was still quality. I still thought it was good at the time, but like now, I was very shocked, and maybe it's just that I'm more like world conscious now, and that I know that like the horrible things that are happening that Daredevil's stopping in the show actually happen. But like for the first few episodes, I think like it's an adjustment for me now. But I think initially it came across as like, is this just them really trying to push it because they have the chance to? This was their chance to make Marvel gritty, so they ran with it. But I think it evens out you know, to a point where not that like it gets lessened, but I guess you get adjusted to it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, honestly, throughout the whole season, I'm sure you felt this way as well. This just felt like a really great Batman Year One story,
Yeah.
but just Daredevil. Um, like the dual personality, the insane level of violence that he uses, like the corrupt cops, but there's one good one that they go back to. It just sort of felt like that, and I think definitely the brutality and the violence of the character, as well as some of the enemies he squares off with, really sort of relate to that for Daredevil. Like it's very much. I like how this show and in this season in particular is very much focused on a character in the MCU that is a hero, but is literally a neighborhood hero. Like even more so than Spider-Man. He is the hero of Hell's Kitchen, which is like a neighborhood of Manhattan. Like he's not even the Manhattan hero. He's like the one neighborhood of Manhattan, right? And I like how they focus on him being like this very, very protective hero, and with that, he's very violent. Like he's very adamant about protecting Hell's Kitchen, and he'll do it any way possible. Obviously, without killing anyone, but pretty much doing everything until that point.
Yeah, I think it's like Daredevil's a great character. I've read some Daredevil comics, and when I was a kid, I was introduced to him through that Neversoft PS1 game, you know?
Same.
But yeah, just seeing the way they bring him to life in this show, and specifically, like, shout out to Charlie Cox, who at this point I think is up there with like the Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman's, Robert Downey Jr.'s. Is like I don't think I'd ever want anybody else to be this character because he just gets it. He's delivering in every second of this show. He has screen presence. Like he is Matt Murdock, and I think is like so much of what works about the show.
No, you're right. I mean, he kills it as Matt Murdock and as the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. Like he really sort of like turns it on and off when he needs to. And I was like really surprised. Like I was watching his performance as someone who can see playing a blind person, and like it seems like he really. I'm interested to see like what his process was to get into that role. Because like that, I imagine is a very difficult thing to do. Like you literally forget everything you know to dive into that, and he does it exceptionally well. So yeah, I think you're right. I feel like he is sort of that character at this point, and I'm glad that the MCU seemingly is just bringing him back because I can't think of anyone else who could really who can really take on that role after he sort of cemented his identity with that.
Yeah, and from what I understand, at least in certain communities that where I've seen, like visually impaired people talk about Daredevil and Charlie Cox and the discussion of representation, like from the communities I've interacted with and the takes I've heard, a lot of people think that he has like you said, he's put in the work and he has gone to like consultants and learned. I'm pretty sure he knows how to read Braille. Like he did it. He did all that stuff to prepare for this role, and he is very passionate about the character and representing him well. And even after things shut down with Netflix, like he still, whenever he popped up and wherever that was, seemed very fond of the character and the universe and the role. So I don't think there's anybody out there who doesn't like Charlie Cox, if I'm being real.
Yeah, no, he's just sort of one of those beloved characters,
Yeah.
like in Hollywood. So he's great.
Yeah. What do you think of the surrounding cast in Daredevil? Because I've seen, like you said, many other people beginning this, and I've seen a variety of takes from people returning to the show, new people, and one of the points of conversation I've seen thrown around a lot is Karen and Foggy. So, what do you think of them as supporting characters in the show?
I like Karen and Foggy. I especially feel like with Foggy and Matt's relationship, you really get that sense of them being friends, especially like in the flashback episode. I think it was episode 10 where like Foggy finds out,
Yeah.
and they do like the cutting of them meeting for the first time in college, and like throughout their relationship as lawyers. I feel like that is handled very well, and like you really get a sense that they're great friends. And I like Karen too. I feel like she probably gets more to do in the later seasons, but it was an interesting choice to make her like one of the clients and then fold her into working with Nelson and Murdoch. But I like them. I feel like they're kind of a source of comfort in the show. Like they're very much comfort characters. And I particularly liked in episode 2, which I was very surprised we got that episode so early in the season, which is like Claire finds Matt in the dumpster, or Claire fixes Matt up after being found in the dumpster, and Foggy and Karen have their own like sort of side episode where they're just like hanging out together. I like that. I feel like so early on in the season they made those characters work, and I'm very glad we didn't really get like forced romance. Like they sort of were kind of hitting it off throughout the season, but by the end, everyone is like separate and they're not forcibly together, which I think is good.
Yeah, I agree. And I was also surprised that that was that early because I did remember the sequence of like Karen and Foggy's little adventure, and they team up and like do a few things throughout the show, but specifically them like going to the bar and just like Foggy trying to be a friend to her when she was really vulnerable. I thought that was way later in the show, so seeing it that early was surprising, and I think their role does a lot for the show and Daredevil's reach. Like you said, he is a guardian of Hell's Kitchen, and that's it. Like focusing a good chunk of season 1 on Karen and Foggy, I think helps to make that neighborhood feel like the scope of it to make more sense. It's not just like, oh yeah, it's Matt on rooftops and in back alleys. Like you get to see the everyday lives of people in Hell's Kitchen through the stuff that Karen and Foggy have to do. And I agree with you that they're comfort characters where Matt is so dark always. Like he has a charm, but Karen and Foggy have opportunities with each other to be like vulnerable humans and have nice softer moments that I think just puts into perspective everything that Matt is doing and the extents he goes to defend Hell's Kitchen, which again gets a good representation as a character through his friends. So I really like their usage in the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we got to talk about Kingpin, of course. What do you think of Kingpin?
Yeah, he is equally similar to Charlie Cox as Daredevil. Vincent D'Onofrio is just Kingpin, right? Like they're not too many other people can be him, and he like so quickly captured the essence of that character in this season. And what I love about him in this season is it takes a few episodes. Obviously, you know where we're getting, but it takes a few episodes for characters to even mention his name. Yeah. And coming off of Hawkeye, this show infinitely, I know maybe it's not a fair comparison, but it like infinitely has a better Kingpin reveal than Hawkeye does. Like it takes its time. You know that there is someone lurking in the shadows, like controlling everything. People are afraid to say his name. Like you purposely don't say it. And like he's working through like an assistant to do his thing. And then when we finally get him, like I love the reveal of like him in the art gallery, and then finally like learning his backstory and like understanding and having like some empathy for him because of his piece of shit dad that made him the way he is. Yeah, they handle his character so well, and like it's rare in now we're considering this the MCU. Like it's rare in the MCU that we get villains like that. Like there's a handful of characters that we all sort of sympathize and empathize with as villains, and Kingpin's definitely on that short list.
Yeah, the only one I can honestly compare him to is a former holder of the best MCU villain in Killmonger, where you get to see the scope of this person's life and why they ended up on the path they're on. Where, like, yeah, Thanos is written well. Green Goblin is just a straight up, like, force of chaos villain. Vulture you feel like is relatable as like an average person, but being able to, like you said, sort of understand where a villain's coming from and like seeing why they're doing what they're doing and why they believe they are right, getting that look into his past was, I think, a choice, and I think it's a choice that paid off for them because I think that went a long way to make Kingpin feel more than just the rich guy calling shots. You know, like he in this season, like we see him get his hands dirty, and that's, I think, something that holds more impact after we spend the first third of the show not knowing who he is or his name, right? So I'm with you. I think the reveal works real great. The one thing I will call out, because I was watching this with Kayla, it was her first time going through Daredevil, right? She pointed this out, and I also was laughing at it. I think the episode before Kingpin is revealed, or maybe the episode he is revealed to the audience, Ben in his office pins a king in his corkboard with a bunch of cards, and I was like, okay, that's a bit on the nose. Like, okay, I get it. Very clever.
That's funny. I don't think
Yeah,
they ever. Do they ever say Kingpin in this season?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, like that. That's very much like a comic booky moniker, right? Yeah, I think Fisk is kind of just what we get for him.
Yeah, which is fair. You know, like
Yeah,
I think in even in Insomniac Spider-Man, which does get cartoony and comic booky, like I think he calls him Fisk most of the time. So,
yeah, pretty sure.
I guess in terms of the number of episodes and just like the way the story unfolds, it is interesting, I think, because unlike the current Disney Plus shows, I sort of enjoyed the fact that it was a couple arcs almost in a weird way, as opposed to just an overarching story. Like, obviously, we're building to a point with everything, but we have like the Union Allied arc at the beginning, and then we have the follow up of the Russians, and then we have some flashback stuff and like stuff with Stick, and then the conclusion. So, how do you feel about the way they handle all the different layers of the story here?
It feels more like a TV show than I was remembering, and especially compared to what we've been talking about this past episode, especially compared to the Disney Plus shows, where like particularly like I said earlier, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Hawkeye sort of just felt like long movies that just so happened to be cut up in 8 episodes. This show is very episodic, and like each episode feels very different and distinct. Like episode 1 was a really great pilot, I thought, and then episode 2 really dug deep uh, with Claire and Matt, and then also having like, the amazing hallway scene, which we should talk about at some point. But and then like episode 10 is focused on Matt and Foggy sort of like dealing with the ramifications of Matt being Daredevil, and the great episode of Matt being locked in a warehouse. Like there are so many great
Yeah,
distinct
dude. Oh my
episodes
god.
that like I feel like we didn't really get that aside from like WandaVision and like in parts Loki with the Disney Plus shows, and I feel like that's sort of lacking with the modern MCU shows where like this season, excuse me, this season felt like a season of television.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. Where like it was a different time. This was like when the Arrowverse was becoming huge on TV, and superhero television existed very differently than it does now. So I think it's also very weird because like you wouldn't really expect that to be the case with the release format of Netflix, right? Where you drop it all at once. I think it would make more sense to have it be that this is a split up movie as opposed to the fact that Daredevil does feel so distinct in terms of where they are, what they're doing every episode, servicing the main plot. When on the Marvel side with Disney Plus so far, it's felt like you said, kind of for the most part, chopped up movies, and that might just be like the growing pains of learning how to write Marvel differently after so long. Because I think Mandalorian is able to do that self-contained. Each episode is its own thing every week. So it's possible to get that, I think, in this new era. But revisiting here for sure, it stands out. So out of the ones you've listed, right? Like, are one of those episodes the standout for you? Like, which one is your favorite from season one?
It's either episode 2 with Claire and Matt meeting, and like her patching him up and like him still dealing with being Daredevil and then figuring out where the Russians kidnapped that kid and doing the hallway scene. I think that like pound for pound is probably the best, or my favorite. And then I think a close second would be the warehouse episode where Matt is locked in this warehouse with like police, like corrupt police officers surrounding the building, and he's with I think Vladimir or one of the Russians, and like they have to work together to get out of the situation. I think those are both standouts for me. But what about you?
I think it's huge respect to the episode with Claire because I love their back and forth, and Rosario Dawson has great chemistry with him. Like the interrogation scene and everything with the hallway fight at the end, obviously very cool. I'm pretty sure that got nominations on because of that scene. But for me, it definitely is the warehouse one because it I think that's around, if not exactly, the mid-season episode. And
Yeah, it's like I think it's episode 5. I think you're right.
okay, so maybe just around there. Like it owns that, you know, like mid-seasons of a television show, I get aren't a big deal when you're dropping every episode at once, but you build up a tension with Kingpin and the struggle that these characters are going through so far. And you feel like at least to that point, yeah, Matt's been beaten down a lot, but he seems like he's in a good spot for where he's trying to make his plan come to fruition. And then it so easily falls apart. And just the way they build the tension and the stakes in that episode, I think is like kind of masterful for at least this show as a whole, but like Marvel television, like easily the most tense episode of a Marvel TV thing I've watched in the last year, with the exception of like maybe that first episode of WandaVision. So, yeah, big fan.
Yeah, that one really is amazing, and I think you're right. Like that's a point where the cards are all sort of stacked against Matt, and like even Foggy at the end. I don't know if it's in this episode or a subsequent one where the blame of the police officers being shot, and the buildings being exploded is sort of placed on the devil of Hell's Kitchen, and like even his friend is against him, not knowing it's Matt, obviously, but yeah, that is sort of the turning point of the season, and I think it's handled very well.
And I also love when this works, but the fact that they have like 3 different storylines going on throughout that entire episode and they all come together at the end with the explosion, like that's so good. That's very impressive because like you have the Karen and Foggy arc with helping Mrs. Cardenas, and then you have Kingpin and Vanessa at dinner, and Matt with the Russian. Like that entire 3 pillars of that story, and then seeing it all fall apart again goes back to the point you brought up at the start of this. Like it grounds everything in Hell's Kitchen and feels so personal that it makes the stakes feel super high in a way that I feel like a lot of Marvel things outside of maybe Infinity War and Endgame can't really get too often. So I really love that warehouse episode.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's definitely one of the standouts in the season, I would say.
I want to ask you what you think about the aesthetics of Daredevil because I am a sucker for like all the red, the lighting, the way it's shot, the Catholic imagery, the Catholic guilt subplot and stuff with Matt, like all of the surface level stuff with Daredevil, I eat up. It is up my alley, and I think the show does it in a great way.
Yeah, something on this rewatch, I didn't really remember enjoying the cinematography of this season as much as I do now. Something I noticed in particular rewatching in the past couple of weeks was how yellow the lighting is.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that was like a very purposeful choice considering how Matt describes the way he sees the world, like a world on fire. Um, and like all the city lights when it's nighttime outside, like all the reflections in through the window are yellow, and like all the lighting kits I'm sure that they used for this show have like yellow filters on them, or yellow gels on them. And I think that was a really great choice where like they don't really cause too much attention to it. And I think for me, it was very easy to miss the first few times I watched it because I was like, oh, it's nighttime. It's just those are the city lights, like they're yellow. But I think it was like very much a purposeful choice, considering like how Matt described how he sees the world, and I thought that was great. Also, like to go back to the hallway scene, um, I feel like modern, especially MCU fights are so boring. In the way the fights are filmed in the show are it's just so intense, and even like removing the one shot throughout that episode, which was great, but like the way the punches just land on people in the show is just so brutal, and like you feel them in a way that like it's so much like the antithesis of like any MCU movie where it just kind of feels like a cartoons are fighting in a way where yeah, I feel like aesthetically this show really like feels distinct in those two ways for me.
Yeah, I also really enjoy, specifically just with the choreography of everything. Like Matt gets tired fast, and I
Mm.
really love that because, like we've seen in the MCU at this point, there are plenty of characters who just straight up don't have powers, right? Like Clint, Natasha, Sam. They're just people that are very highly skilled, right? And Matt, he's just a dude. Like his senses were heightened from the chemicals, right? But like that doesn't mean he like his lungs are better, right? Like he's just a guy. So I really do think that that adds a lot of weight to everything you're talking about with the fight scenes. And again, I'll say the stakes. Like this dude gets beaten down in episode 1 and 2, like brutally, to the point where they make it clear he's just a guy. And I really, really like that about the way they present his character. And I think that was my biggest takeaway on the rewatch is just that like you feel stakes, even though it's a Marvel thing. We know they're gonna win. Like, are they though? Like, I think that was the surprise that I had going into this.
Yeah, no, you're right. It kind of reminded me, like you mentioned Hawkeye. It reminded me of like the Matt Fraction run that I read recently, where like he's bandaging himself up all the time.
Hmm.
As and I mentioned earlier, Batman Year One, like it very much seems like you mentioned it's just some dude on a mission, full well knowing that he is not prepared. Aside from the like fighting techniques that he has at his disposal, he is not prepared to like take on the threat that he's taking on. Like he is very much confident in his abilities, but like he's kind of on a suicide mission in a lot of ways. And I feel like they handle that very well with like him constantly getting overwhelmed to the point where he gets to Nobu and he's like, all right, I should probably be wearing some armor.
Yeah. What do you think of the suit? Because I really love just the athletic wear and the wrist wraps and the bandana, but I think in terms of adapting a Daredevil costume, like it's pretty good. I like it.
Yeah, I like the final suit that he gets, and I think the lead up to that is like one of the more satisfying
Hmm.
lead up suit moments. It's funny because like every Phase Four Marvel movie or project has had that, so like we've seen a lot of that recently. But I kind of love the black uniform. Like that's kind of my preferred Daredevil uniform at this point.
Hmm.
I think it gets better. Like I think come season 3, he has a really solid Daredevil costume. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, I really kind of like just the plain black costume, honestly.
I agree. I think it's like my preferred look for him. Not that I don't like the costume they have, but it feels like just the slightest bit out of place, I think, after you spend. Because what that reveal is like one of the last episodes, right? That's like 11, 12, 10, 12, something like that.
I think doesn't he get it in like the very last episode?
Yeah.
I think.
So maybe that's it. That because I felt this way on my first time going through it too. Like I was waiting for him. I was like, get the damn suit already, dude. But in the rewatch, I think it just stands out more because it's like this feels out of place kind of after the tone of the entire show, where it's like, yeah, we're still a Marvel thing at the end, which I don't think I was forgetting it was Marvel as I was watching the season, but like I think it's about scope and scale, and then when you add the costume in for the finale, it's like, yeah, it's not perfect, and I do prefer the old thing, but I did remember I think them getting a redesign at one point for like a better suit.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say this is bad. Like it's a good looking costume, but I kind of like what the black suit sort of stands for. Like he is just some sort of dude that just throws on a sock over his head and runs out into the night. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think a lot of the fandom agreed on that because didn't they? I mean, I think they worked it into the story, but for season three, didn't he like get back into the black mask?
Yeah, without like going into like super spoilers, like
Yeah,
the final episode of season 3 has him in the black suit.
yeah, very cool. Um, I mean, is there any other major like? There's so many small threads and other characters to bring up with Daredevil. Are there any things you want to rattle off, or any other major talking points about season one that come to mind for you?
I mean, the hallway fight I think is still perfect. I think I saw some like little hidden cuts in there, obviously, and I think they managed that very well.
Yeah.
Um, that I think is amazing. Honestly, like just overall, I was surprised that like I remember liking this show, but I guess I was kind of surprised this rewatch like how much I loved it. Like if I ranked this in my MCU, it'd be very high. Like in my MCU ranking, it'd be very high. Like top 5, I'm sure.
Jack, I was gonna say for the hell of it, we should rank it in the MCU.
Yeah, I'd be down to do that.
Yeah, maybe once we comprehensively understand the series, maybe
Okay.
rather than just ranking the season.
That's a thing because I think season 1 is so perfect
Yeah.
and like I really do think it's like a perfect season of television. Wraps up so
Mhm.
nicely. And then season 2 is like kind of hit or miss. And then season 3 I think is really solid. But if I just had to rank season 1, it would probably be like a top 5.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you because when the episode wrapped, I was like, or the final episode wrapped, I was like, okay, so should I try to make us rank it? And I want to eventually, but yeah, I mean, like season one is just like kind of perfect to the point where like I'm looking at my MCU ranking right now. It would probably be top three if I'm being real. Like just in terms of quality, right? Because currently my third place is No Way Home. That's a lot of spectacle and some great emotions. But I think Daredevil's able to just do something so different from the rest of the MCU that I still don't think was replicated by anything in the MCU since. And God, I want more of it. you know?
My sad realization is that I don't think we'll get another Daredevil show that replicates this season.
Yeah, we
Like
won't.
I think this is the only thing we'll get for this because I really don't think Disney Plus has made a show like that yet. Um, Even with like I watched The Mandalorian season 2. That's like fairly violent, but not nowhere nearly close to the way this show is.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, I don't see that happening again. I would love to be proven wrong, but I think this is sort of the one shot we get at Daredevil feeling this exact way is season 1.
Yeah, I agree. Because from my memory of season two, I even think it was toned down a little. But yeah, I think this was another conversation I saw a lot. Kingpin now, has he been nerfed? I don't know if it's necessarily he's been nerfed, just that Kingpin has to exist. Like, it's the same way in comics. Daredevil can be super gruesome and Deadpool can be super gruesome in their own individual comics, but when they're in a Spider-Man comic, they're not doing that, you know?
Right.
I think that's just a consequence of how these characters operate with each other. So, yeah, it's real like intense for Kingpin to smash a dude's head in with a car door and then wipe the blood off with his little handkerchief and then go to dinner with his art gallery girl. But like in the MCU currently, where we've seen Kingpin, I've seen a lot of people rightfully comment that like, hey, this feels different than Kingpin that we saw before. But I think you're right in that Daredevil Season One is irreplicable moving forward, but I don't think that's a bad thing if we were to get more of these characters and actors in some project or another.
Yeah, my hope is that like if they do a straight up Daredevil project, because these characters are going to appear in like Echo and things like that. But if we get a straight up Daredevil project, I'm not expecting it to function like season one, in
Hmm.
terms of like the depiction and like what we talked about with like cinematography and choreography and the way they treat violence and things like that. I would like something on the scale of like the Mandalorian, but for Daredevil. Like if they are able to replicate like the episodic thing, they I think they do very well with the Mandalorian, but just sort of translate that back to Daredevil and like have the violence be important, but like obviously you don't probably can't go over the top on Disney Plus.
Hmm.
I think it could be a really solid show. Like they get everyone back. If the writers and the showrunners are able to come back as well, I think it could be another great addition to the MCU.
Yeah, and I do believe that they already have some people on their bill right now. Like I think the writers of the Daredevil show are writing Echo, so they got him around. And whether a Daredevil project comes to fruition through a new television season or a movie, which like I don't know, like obviously I would love to see Daredevil propped up to that level, but I feel like there's just something so great, especially with like with the legal side and being able to have that aspect, which we didn't even touch on, like all the courtroom drama. I think that works a lot better in TV than it would in any Daredevil movie, you know?
Yeah, because like there's so many different like week by week you could have different cases and things like that, which I think we'll see more in She Hulk, but
Hmm.
that is very integral to the character. So I would love to see that more.
Absolutely. Well, that is really all I had to say on season one. I think we summed it up very well. It was a great rewatch, highly recommended, and it's one of the best Marvel projects of the last 10 years. Do you think it's the best Marvel TV show you've watched?
Yeah, I was even trying to think of anything. I think WandaVision is probably number two, unless I'm forgetting anything.
Hmm.
But like far and away, I think season one of Daredevil is like is kind of perfect in a lot of ways. Like there are very little negatives, and honestly, I can't even think of anything. Like it does everything it needs to do and accomplishes it so well. Yeah, I was honestly really surprised at how much I loved it because I knew I really liked it, but I didn't realize I liked it that much. So yeah, it's kind of perfect.
Is it a 10 out of 10?
If I had to rank this on Letterbox, I'd give it a 5 out of 5 for sure.
I would as well. I think it's as close to perfect as you can get with, especially for a first season. Like, this was the first Marvel live action television show, too, that was like on this scale post Iron Man, you know? Well, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that one's definitely not canon, right?
Certainly not.
So, yeah, I really loved it also, and I'm excited to get into season two and see more of the show because I don't remember season two nearly as much. I don't even think I remember most of season two, if I'm being honest. But I'm excited to give it a watch.
Yeah.
But
So when will the review for that one be, Christian?
ooh, that is a good question. Let me look at a calendar And while I do so, Jack, where can the agents of Excelsior find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at FascinatedJack. I'm going to shout out our Fantasy Critic League, Christian. I believe, I'm going to pull it up here. I believe it is called the La Li Lu Lay Low in reference to the Patriots from Metal Gear Solid. I think this is open, so like if you want to go find us, you can search the La Li Lu Lay Low on Fantasy Critic. And for those that are wondering, what am I even talking about? This is like video game drafts similar to sports drafts, where there's 5 of us. We each pick certain games that we think will perform well critically. And depending on how well they do, we get certain points, and whoever gets the most points by the end of the year wins. It's very fun. We did a draft of it. I think that recording will be going up at some point or another. But throughout the year, we're gonna have like little check-ins and see how we're all doing. So it's very fun to keep track of. I got my first points on the board thanks to Rainbow Six Siege or Rainbow Six Extraction. Not a lot of points, mind you, but I'm on the board. So it's going to be fun. We're going to be talking about it, I'm sure, on this show, just in reference to it. So, yeah, that's where you can find me.
Excellent. So, Jack, I'm looking at a calendar right now. How do we feel about either the first or second week of February? That would either be February 3rd for us on the recording schedule or the 10th for release on the 5th or the 12th. Which one tickles your fancy?
I think the 3rd for recording could do. That gives us 2 weeks to go through, I think, an additional 13 episodes.
Yes, I did check. It is 13.
Okay. I got through the season like very quickly, like probably within a week. But I think having that 2-week buffer is good.
Sure, yeah. Just because if people are following along also, don't feel the need to rush, 2 weeks I think is solid, because that's an episode a night with a little leeway, basically. Yeah. So, we will discuss season 2 of Daredevil for listeners, you'll be hearing that February 5th, so look forward to that. Follow along. That's another 13. Seeing what's up with Matt, Karen, Foggy, some other characters who I won't spoil if you're watching for the first time. And if you want to follow me on anything between now and then, you can find me at Chun2D2. The show is available to follow on Twitter at ExcelsiorJC. If you want to listen to this episode, the next episode that we talk about Avengers next week or Daredevil in 2 weeks, you can check that out on youtube.com/joyclicks under the playlist for Excelsior. New episodes every Saturday. Like Jack said, the Fantasy Critic recording draft is being edited currently and will be releasing soon-ish on the channel. But if you want the audio version of Excelsior, you can check it out on your favorite podcast service like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, whatever you listen to podcasts on. If you can, rating and reviewing on your platform of choice would be very appreciated because it helps us out a ton, helps us reach more people, and spreads the good word about Daredevil. It's great. It's better than anything else right now. So definitely follow that along in the coming weeks. And if you want to support the shows on a monetary level, you can do so by going to patreon.com/joyclicks at the $1 and $5 tiers. $5, you'll get producer credit on this show and every show we do, like Aaron Easton and Jose Garcia. So thank you very much. And that is it. Another week of Marvel in the bag. Like I said, next week we will return with probably a light news week for Marvel's Avengers and Marvel as a whole, unless something drastic happens. But until then, Excelsior.
Excelsior.